Today on Inside Utah Politics, Utah Democrats were hoping to build on a successful 2018 in Salt Lake County. But this election turned out different. The party chair is here with his thoughts on the results. Plus, the COVID-19 vaccine expected to be in Utah soon. How should the state handle distribution? And will enough Utahns be willing to take it? Our panel debates.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We begin today with Utah Democratic Party Chair Jeff Merchant. Jeff, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Glenn. Glad to be here.
Let's get right into the election results. I would characterize 2018 as a very successful one, the midterm for your party in Salt Lake County, and then the tide turned in 2020. What's your assessment of how that all went down?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would be lying if I said we weren't at least a little surprised by how things turned out for Utah Democrats. But, you know, look, we still picked up a seat in the legislature. This represents the third election cycle in a row that we've picked up at the legislature. We feel good about where Democrats are going in the state. And, you know, I mean, we lost a few races we thought we would win, but we feel confident moving forward into 2022.
Okay, we're going to get into those state races a little bit more in just a second, but let's start with Congressional District 4, one of the most heated and watched races across the country. And Democratic incumbent Ben McAdams only got one term, and then he loses this time around. What was the difference in the 4th Congressional District this time?
Well, you know, look, there were a number of factors. I think that the number one factor, of course, was COVID-19. Ben McAdams made the choice not to go out, not to walk, not to expose other people. I mean, this is a man who was one of the first members of Congress to suffer from COVID-19, had a long recovery and wasn't willing to spread that to other people. And we know as Democrats in the state of Utah, the way we win is retail politics. It's going door to door, it's talking to people, it's getting people to know who you are, and Ben just didn't get that opportunity this time.
What impact do you think the initiatives of 2018 played? Because you can't argue that those brought out a very large Democratic crowd that maybe we didn't see this time.
Yeah, I do think that the initiatives played a pretty substantial role in bringing turnout up in 2018. Now, look, we beat that turnout in 2020, right? And I think that one of the things that we need to be able to figure out, and frankly, I don't have an answer to quite yet, is how many of those people that voted for those initiatives, 2, 3, and 4, need to come back out in 2022 to see the tide turn again.
So what do you do to look into that and try to get that answer?
Sure. Well, we know who a lot of those people are. That's public information. And I think that one of the things that both of the political parties are probably going to be doing is trying to get in touch with those people, talk with them, see what motivated them. You know, the Utah Democratic Party is beginning the process of what will probably amount to a rather in-depth post-mortem of this election so that we can see exactly what it is that motivated people to come out. I mean, 91% turnout is really massive. And the real question is, will all of those people who voted in 2020 come back in 2022? And if not, which one of them, which set of people will come back?
The 4th Congressional District was the one seat Democrats held, a congressional seat here in Utah. Are we to the point now, obviously this is going to go through the redistricting process soon, but are we to the point right now where Democrats can't, because that was the one that you have been able to win, are we to the point now where Democrats can't win any of the congressional districts?
I don't really think that that's true. I mean, if you look at the last 10 years, this seat has been held by Republicans and by Democrats. It is a classic swing district. And I don't know if the Republicans are going to be able to do any more damage without either, one, putting another member of their congressional delegation at risk, or two, really starting to disenfranchise Utahns by using a really crazy system by which they create maps. Now, with the Redistricting Commission, we're going to see if the Republicans are willing to, put their money where their mouth is. They made a deal with the Better Boundaries folks and the people that supported Proposition 4, and now we're going to see if they're actually going to follow through on that. I'm not sure that they will.
Well, as we've known all along, it's a non-binding issue. They'll make the recommendations, and then the legislature can do as they will. So, yeah, we will wait and see how that turns out. I want to know what you make of the Really big turnout in the southern end of Salt Lake County and the northern end of Utah County, because as you break down the numbers, those really seem to be a big difference in the 4th District this year.
Yeah, they did end up being a big difference. I think that, kudos to Utah County's new clerk, who I think has done a fabulous job getting people in Utah County to vote. There weren't the lines that we saw 2 years ago. There wasn't the chaos. I think that naturally increases the turnout in that part of the 4th Congressional District. And look, in the southwest portion of Salt Lake County is getting bigger and bigger. That doesn't necessarily mean all of those voters are going to vote for Republicans. 2 of those precincts went for Ben McAdams this last time around, and I think that as more and more people move to that area, it's not going to be the Republican stronghold that it's been in the last 20 or so years.
Okay, so you did mention the one gain in the House. That was House District 38, I believe. Ashley Matthews. She'll be taking over for Representative Hutchings, but there were a number of races, well, not a number, but a few others where it really looked like the Democrat was going to come out ahead, but boy, that gap really closed as we came down the stretch, and Republican incumbents ended up flipping those races. How did that all play out?
Yeah, we knew as of election night that all of those races would tighten up. A number of those races we were leading by what we thought was enough. And as the results came in, we felt pretty confident. But as you mentioned, the last day or two, things started to flip, particularly in a couple of races we felt really good about. And that's just how it ended up this time. Now, in my opinion, part of that was as a result of a lot of late voting by certain Republicans, particularly Republicans that weren't interested in mail-in balloting as a result of President Trump's constant, put down of that process. And I think that those folks at the end of the day really came out and hurt some of our candidates.
Yeah, I did not expect to see even those provisionals break so heavily Republican in Salt Lake County as they did, and that could be one of the explanations. All right, a couple of bright spots. You had incumbents in districts that are considered swing districts that had pretty convincing wins. That would be in House District 32 with Representative Suzanne Harrison and Senate District 8 with Kathleen Reeby. Those have to be some of the bright spots you're looking at from these election results.
Yeah, it's interesting, Glenn, because a lot of people were very concerned about those races. A lot of people were, they keep coming back to me, are they okay? Look, anybody who knows Senator Reeby or Representative Harrison knows that they are 2 of the hardest working members of the legislature. As much as I want to say that I was really scared for both of them, I felt very comfortable with where they were. They work really well with their constituents really respect them, and they really do deserve to go back to the legislature. So I'm glad they both won.
So this was the first year we saw straight party ticket voting removed from the ballot. Do you think that might have hurt some of your Democratic candidates?
This is an interesting question. A lot of people, particularly in Democratic circles, have been debating this. I frankly, I come down on the side that straight party ticketing hurt Utah Democrats in 2020. There were a lot of people that came out and voted for Joe Biden, and then they never completed that ballot. They voted one time and moved on.
Do you think they may have if they could have just filled in one circle?
That's right. One circle would have done that. Now, look, there are plenty of arguments for why straight party ticketing is bad. I don't necessarily deny those claims, but it definitely, I think, at least in Salt Lake County, hurt Democrats this time.
Okay, Democratic Party Chair Jeff Merchant, appreciate your perspective. Thanks for being here.
Always happy to do it. Thanks, Glenn.
Still to come, local business owners call on the governor to release COVID relief funds to help them stay afloat. Our panel weighs in on that a little bit later. But first, the election certification deadline has passed, but still, some Republicans refuse to call Joe Biden the winner of the race for president. We'll get into that after the break. Tuesday was the deadline for states to submit certified election results, narrowing President Trump's hopes of overturning the 2020 election. But as Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer finds, Republicans on Capitol Hill are holding out hope and putting all plans for a Biden presidency on pause.
Senator Marco Rubio isn't ready to say who won the 2020 election.
What I said I would accept is ultimately what states certify legally through their process and the Electoral College decides. That's how our system works.
Rubio says he's letting the process play out.
I do think there are some things that happened in this election that we need to go back and look at.
The Florida Republican says while his state was prepared for the flood of mail-in ballots this year, many others were not.
And it caused all sorts of delays in the vote counting process that has undermined the confidence of a significant percentage of the American people in the result.
Republicans on Capitol Hill are pushing back on planning for a Biden transition until after the Electoral College results are finalized. Democrats tell me the delays are dangerous.
We have a centuries-long tradition of the peaceful transfer of power.
North Carolina Democrat David Price is encouraging his colleagues to be honest about the results and stand up to the president.
It really is distressing that Republicans will not call his hand.
Rubio says he doesn't know if President Trump will attend the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden.
He's not a politician. He doesn't operate in an orthodox way.
But Rubio doesn't expect that day to end the president's political career.
Look, if the president runs, he's going to be the nominee, and I think he's going to win.
The Electoral College casts its votes on December 14th. Reporting in Washington, I'm Kelly Meyer.
Pentagon officials say they have fired a number of high-level Army officials at Fort Hood Military Base in Texas. The base has been under investigation since July to address a pattern of sexual assault, harassment, suicides, and even murder. The findings of that report were released earlier in the week. Washington correspondent Anna Warnicki has the details.
Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy says he's fired or suspended 14 Fort Hood commanders and leaders after a 90-day independent investigation into the base's command culture.
This report, without a doubt, will cause the Army to change our culture.
McCarthy says a panel of 5 civilians, including Carrie Ritchie, interviewed 647 mostly female soldiers who revealed a command climate permissive of sexual harassment and sexual assault.
There was an overall sense that there is that reluctance to report because who is going to believe us?
The investigation was launched after attention to the disappearance and murder of Specialist Vanessa Guillen exposed a pattern of violence at the Texas base.
We are holding leaders accountable, and we will fix this.
As a result of the investigation, Army Chief of Staff General James McConville says the Army has a new policy on missing soldiers and launched the People First Task Force. The group will be responsible for mapping out a plan to address the report's findings and then reevaluate the Army's current policies and programs.
The Army will begin implementation by March 2021.
McCarthy says the report not only outlines what is wrong at Fort Hood, but in the Army as a whole. He says the entire branch will be responsible with the changes they implement moving forward.
We have a great deal of work ahead of us.
McCarthy says he plans to brief senior Army leaders on the report on Wednesday. In Washington, I'm Anna Warnicki.
Still to come, the COVID-19 vaccine. How should distribution work in Utah? And what are Utahns thinking about it? We'll get into that with our panel after the break. Time now for a closer look at some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Auditor John Dougal, a.k.a. the Million Vote Man, and State Representative Suzanne Harrison. Representative, not quite 1 million votes, but still a convincing win for you as well. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, good to be with you, Glenn.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. Let's get right into the COVID vaccine. Representative, let's start with you. Would like to get your thoughts on this, being that you're someone on the front lines. How should the distribution process work in the state of Utah?
Well, certainly I think the key is to make sure people get good information about the vaccine and the safety of the vaccine. While this vaccine was developed quickly by a host of amazing scientists and doctors, no corners were cut on safety, and it will be safe. And I'm going to get vaccinated. I encourage all of you to get vaccinated when it is available. And certainly an independent group of experts is looking at how that should be rolled out. Healthcare workers on the front lines will be top of list. Other folks like long-term care facility residents, essential workers, which I include teachers and childcare providers and first responders, should also be top of list.
John, what are the key factors you're looking at as we begin distribution of this vaccine?
Well, clearly I anticipate it'll go to medical professionals and so forth first. I think there's going to be a rush of folks that are interested in it, and there's also going to be a set of folks that are going to cautiously watch to see what happens as it rolls out. And then another set that it's not left or right, it's just we've got a group of folks that are anti-vaccine, and I think we'll see that play out as we look at it. I think there's going to be some concern if you start to give the vaccine to elderly, and some are going to die just because they're old, and then people are going to be skeptical somewhat of the vaccine, that is the vaccine killing people. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think there's going to be some narrative about that.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. I've been told that it needs to be somewhere between 70 to 80% of the population that needs to take this for it to be effective. Representative, do you see us reaching those numbers in the state of Utah?
I hope so. And I just urge people again, when you have a sick loved one or a sick child, you don't go to your Facebook account for information on how to help your child. You go to your doctor or your primary care provider. And I really encourage people to go to reputable sources. Sources like the Centers for Disease Control, CDC.gov, has really good information and reputable information about the safety of this vaccine and how to overcome those fears. Certainly, no one should be forced to have a medical procedure or an injection, but getting good information is going to be key.
John, your thoughts on that? Will we reach that level of those getting the vaccine in the state of Utah?
I think ultimately we'll probably reach those levels. The question is over what period of time. Do I think we're going to get there in the next 6 months? No, I'm skeptical on that. I think there's going to be, like I said, a set of folks that are going to want to see how it plays out with other folks. Are there any longer term effects that might impact them? But over time, as people see that the vaccine works, that it provides benefit, that business starts to open up, I think more and more folks will get the vaccine.
Let's talk a little bit more about Operation Warp Speed. This happened very quickly. Your thoughts on how it all came from, the virus coming here to America and having this vaccine in less than a year? Representative, your thoughts there?
This is really unprecedented. The amount of work and expertise that has gone into this and the speed at which this has happened is really phenomenal. And I credit the Trump administration in focusing on this, and also all the scientists that have been involved. And I want to just emphasize that even though we have wonderful news about a highly effective series of vaccines, it's not going to be widely available to the majority of the public for months. So we need to make sure we remain committed to these very basic public health measures that we all know about, the washing hands, physical distancing, wearing a mask to get us through this winter and literally save lives and prevent unnecessary illness.
I want to ask you that follow up on that, Representative. You mentioned the efficacy upwards of 90–95%. That's incredible. I mean, not even the flu vaccine reaches those levels, does it?
It's truly phenomenal, and I just am so grateful to everyone who's worked on it.
Okay, John, your thoughts on Operation Warp Speed and how this came together so quickly?
So I think Operation Warp Speed has some benefit and has helped accelerate some things, but remember the Pfizer vaccine did not go through Operation Warp Speed. It was just purely a private sector activity to speed it along. But I think what we see is the power of modern medicine. While the mRNA vaccine is new for humans, this is the first time we'll use it in humans. It's been in animals for over a decade. They've been using this kind of technology.
Let's get into another topic real quick. Want to move along, that being COVID relief funds. Local businesses calling on the governor to release upwards of somewhere around $230 million. As of recording, the governor had not laid out his plan for doing so. Representative, how do you think that money should be spent?
Well, certainly we have a host of small businesses restaurants that are really suffering right now. We need to make sure that we're addressing their needs and the needs of their workers. Our local public schools need more support in addressing the various needs that COVID is presenting. I think food insecurity, housing insecurity would be top of my list, in addition to public health support as well.
John, how should this money be spent?
I think the money should be targeted. Too often it's parachuted to lots of folks that aren't in need, or businesses that are doing just fine. It should be targeted. But I come from the perspective, when the government is either temporarily restricting or shutting down your business, there should be some form of compensation for that kind of activity. And I think it's some of those areas that the money should be focused on.
Okay, real quick follow-up for you, John. What's the holdup? Local businesses are moving forward with lawsuits over this right now.
So part of the hang-up is money was allocated and distributed to various organizations and entities across the state, but it has to be spent by basically the end of the year. And so what the governor's office is looking at is what money hasn't yet been spent, and then climb that back to say, how do they reallocate that?
Okay, on Wednesday, the Utah Attorney General, Sean Reyes, joining a lawsuit asking the Supreme Court to overturn election results in 4 states the president lost. Those would be Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Representative Harrison, is that how the Attorney General should be spending his time?
You know, I'm really concerned about this. The Trump administration and his attorneys have filed over 50 lawsuits and only had 1 win on a technicality. The rest have been shown to be without merit, without evidence. It's a serious allegation to say that an election was unfair, and it demands that you bring significant evidence to prove that. And this has not been done in the courts, and I am really concerned that our state is getting involved in this way. I really encourage our Attorney General to address the needs of Utahns and the job that he was elected to do. And as someone who lost an election by just 3 votes, I know it hurts sometimes to lose an election.
That's close.
But this has gone through the courts, and it's time for everyone to put their big boy pants on and move on for the good of the country.
John, your thoughts on this? Is this something you want to see our Attorney General engaging in?
Well, I think the broader question is really, the Constitution says legislators are the one that set the rules in regards to elections. And what we've seen over this year is in some places, not the legislators have set the rules, but non-legislative actors have changed the rules, changed the requirements for dates, changed the requirements for signatures, other things like that. And so if we get back to making clear that it's the legislators in each of those states that makes the rules, then I do think that's an important way to spend one's time.
But do you think there's a case there? Can they make a case in these 4 states?
I think there are some areas where they could make some cases. Will it change the outcome of the election? I think that's highly unlikely. But I think it's still, on principle, good to remind folks this is what the Constitution says and this is why it matters.
The Attorney General insists this is not about politics. Representative, is this about politics?
I'm concerned because the Homeland Security, Trump appointed, head of cybersecurity for elections, has stated multiple times this was the most secure election in our nation's history. And I'm concerned, as a person who cares about states' rights, for other states to be intervening in other states' elections when there's really no evidence of significant fraud in any way.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. I want to get to one last topic really quick. This is the Promise Act introduced by Senator Lee. His goal is to hold big tech companies accountable for what he says is political bias. 30 seconds each. Do these social media platforms practice political bias? John, let's start with you.
Yes, I think it does. And one of the key things is if they say they're not going to be in bias and then they do engage in bias, then that's a misrepresentation of their business. But I do not think they should be compelled to speak on behalf of the government in a way the government wants.
Representative.
I share the senator's concern about the influence that big tech has on our public discourse, and certainly those policies need to be clear and applied consistently and fairly. But I think what this issue is really about is misinformation in social media. And we have situations where we have people believing that COVID is a hoax. We have people threatening election officials throughout this country for doing their job because of misinformation on social media. Okay. And it is their obligation to address that for the good of the public and to prevent harm or injury in the public sphere.
Okay, we have run out of time. Great conversation. Thanks to both of you for being here today.
Always great to join you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. State leaders will take the oath of office on Monday, January 4th. The legislative session begins Tuesday, January 19th, and then the presidential inauguration is the following day, Wednesday, January 20th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your day. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.